20. When do you stop looking for a pregnant daughter who's vanished?
I don't think I can survive if I don't find her.
The mother who won't give up.
Mysterious disappearance, the disappearance of Kelsey Shelling.
Long after she fears the worst possible outcome.
We do not have a record of Kelsey Shelling ever being here.
And an on-again, off-again boyfriend, a high school hoop star, as a person of interest.
Young lady in her car with her trip.
He's not scared. What can I do? How can I help? The call that you're making to him is, Kelsey, the mother of your child, is missing. We are desperate to find her.
And then a mysterious late-night Facebook message blows everything apart. Your daughter is not dead. She will be back home alive. But 1,000 miles across the country, another family with a missing daughter gets a very similar message.
He says I know where Megan is, and I can get her back.
I see him. That should be him.
Tonight, 2020 goes undercover in search of a man in a red cap. A money drop in a McDonald's parking lot in exchange for missing girls.
But I got to tell you, coming to a parking lot to collect $75,000, a lot of people would say that sounds like a criminal enterprise.
I'm as shocked as you guys.
It is the ultimate showdown. The two lives still on the line.
Maybe she is out there. Maybe she is alive.
It was just what if, what if, what if.
Good evening. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Put yourself in their shoes. Two desperate families with no clue where their daughters are, vanished without a trace. But over a 7-month investigation, 2020 has discovered a shocking link between them, leading all the way to Russia.
And right here tonight, we're taking you into that world of websites devoted to missing people and strangers who claim to know where your family members are. But at what cost? We're live tonight on Facebook and Twitter. Join the conversation. Here again, Ryan Smith.
February 2013. Dawn breaks cold and clear on a Tuesday morning in Denver, Colorado. And as morning turns to midday, a question hangs in the thin air of Mile High City. Where is Kelsey Shelling? The vivacious 21-year-old recently discovered she's pregnant. Now she's late for work at this Denver housewares store.
She didn't show up for work. I tried calling her, I think, from my cell phone and the store phone. Couldn't get a response.
At his hardware store in Holyoke, Colorado, Kelsey's father, Doug, also has trouble connecting.
Then I thought, well, I'm going to call and see how she's doing. She didn't answer her phone, which is pretty rare.
Tuesday turns into Thursday, and the silence gets louder. Concern morphs into panic, especially for her mother, Laura.
All of her friends started contacting us saying, we've been trying to reach Kelsey and we can't reach her. And when that happened, that is when I got really, really scared, because I just thought there has to be a logical explanation.
But since that fateful February week, no explanation has arrived. With no word from Kelsey, Laura spent years searching on her own.
Developments of the disappearance of a Denver woman, 22-year-old woman.
Kelsey Jean Shelling disappeared on a trip to southern Colorado.
Father, we pray that you would help us to find clues today.
With no word from Kelsey, she's spent years searching on her own.
What do we want? Justice!
Knocking heads with the local police department for their handling of the case.
We appreciate you all so much. Your support keeps us going.
And getting wrapped up in a mystery of her own, involving allegations of sex trafficking and extortion. More on that later.
It's unbelievable to me doing all of the things that I'm doing to just, get out and fight people like I have.
The story traces back here to a town called Holyoke, a couple of hours east of Denver, where the scenery looks more like Kansas than a Coors commercial. This is where Kelsey was born and raised.
Where's the baba?
She liked to be silly, liked to laugh. You look at these pictures and you can just see that.
Mother and daughter develop a tight, unbreakable bond after Laura and her husband Doug split up when Kelsey was just 11 years old.
It was just she and I together alone for a lot of years, so we were very close, pretty inseparable, basically.
Kelsey attends nearby Northeastern Junior College with plans to study psychology. There, she becomes fast friends with her roommate, Allie Sandoval.
She was very fun. She was laughing all the time, always getting into trouble, and just out to have a good time.
And at school, a key figure enters her life, Dante Lucas. Their backgrounds cannot be more different. Dante hails from the central Colorado town of Pueblo, a place more Walmart than Little House on the Prairie. Blue-collar Pueblo has a reputation as the most dangerous town in Colorado because of its high crime rate. At Central High School, Dante stands out as a 6'7" basketball star.
He just had a mad passion just for basketball. He loved everything about the game, and hoping that he can, go on to a Division I basketball school and then maybe make it to the NBA.
But the big college recruiters never come calling. Instead, Dante ends up playing ball at tiny Northeastern Junior College, literally the big man on campus, and in a whirlwind romance with Kelsey Schelling. To Kelsey's friends, the relationship turns toxic from the start.
He would be putting her down, calling her names, saying that she was fat and ugly and nobody else wanted her, and she was lucky enough to have him in her life because she wasn't going to get anything else.
After a couple of tumultuous semesters, the two split up. By 2012, Kelsey has quit school and is living in Denver, working at that home goods store. Dante, his hoop dreams slipping away, is back in Pueblo. To the alarm of Kelsey's friends, the two reconnect.
She loved him.
You think he loved her?
No, you don't treat someone that you love like that. You don't treat them with disrespect the way that he did for her. He would throw things. She would throw things. It was awful.
December rolls in like the snowdrifts in Denver. Kelsey and Dante spend the Christmas holidays together. And shortly thereafter, Mom is asking, what child is this?
She called me when she found out she was pregnant. She was stressed, just told her, I will support you, whatever you need, your family's behind you.
Did she tell you anything about Dante's reaction?
She said he was mad. She said he was very angry.
On Sunday, February 3rd, Kelsey writes to Dante, I know now how you truly do feel. You have no obligation to me, and you don't want to have anything with me. The next morning, Kelsey has a prenatal checkup, and the doctor delivers the news. She's 8 weeks pregnant, and her unborn child is in perfect health. She excitedly texts the sonogram to Dante and her family.
She sent you a picture of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think when you saw the baby?
I was happy. I knew that she was happy.
After that checkup, Dante presses Kelsey to drive down to Pueblo, saying he has a surprise for her. Just wait and see for yourself. You probably wouldn't believe me if I told you. Kelsey responds, tell me what it is and I'll come. Dante, come see for yourself. I know it'll put you in a better mood. Kelsey relents, and at about 10 p.m., the young mom-to-be finishes her shift and pulls away in her black Chevy Cruze, making the lonely 2-hour nighttime drive to Pueblo.
Did you have any idea she was going there?
No, if I would have knew who she was, I would have made her take a friend, or I would have made sure and went with her.
During the drive, Dante texts her to go to Walmart in Pueblo to meet him. At 11:20 p.m., Kelsey pulls into the Walmart parking lot. She waits almost an hour for Dante to show up, finally messaging him that she's tired of waiting and will come to him. At 12:15 in the morning, Dante texts her to meet him on this street. They've met here before. It's near his grandmother's house, Dante's current crash pad. Again, she's left waiting in the car. Where are you? She messages him. I've been here over an hour just waiting. Kelsey is never seen again. By the end of the week, her phone shuts off, and her mother is melting down.
Just sheer panic and disbelief. I mean, I can't even really remember how scared I felt.
Coming up, Dante tells his story to the cops.
We are now leaning towards foul play.
Is the basketball star a piece of a larger puzzle? And could Kelsey's case be connected somehow to another woman who's gone missing over 1,000 miles away? Could there be a nationwide conspiracy kidnapping young women? Stay with us.
2020 continues. What if?
Now to the mysterious disappearance of a Denver woman.
She seemingly disappeared.
The disappearance of Kelsey Schelling.
This much we know. On the night of Monday, February 4th, Kelsey Schelling, very troubled, very pregnant, and maybe still very much in love, makes that late-night drive from Denver to Pueblo, Colorado, to visit her boyfriend, Dante Lucas.
Pregnant woman who vanished. Kelsey was 8 weeks pregnant.
She was last seen in Pueblo.
When Kelsey's family reaches out to Dante, they say he seems oddly unconcerned.
And I just said, if you hear from her, you need to tell her that we're taking this very serious and that we're calling the police. And so he's like, okay, I will.
What did he sound like on the phone? Because the call that you're making to him is, Kelsey, the woman that you are with, the mother of your child, is missing. We are desperate to find her.
Nothing. No. Not worked up. Not, just...
He's not scared. What can I do? How can I help?
No, he just says, if I hear from her, I'll let you know.
The Pueblo PD take over the case. As the last person known to have seen Kelsey alive, Dante falls under immediate scrutiny and is called in for questioning. He gives a detailed account of what happened. Corroborating Kelsey's texts, he says Kelsey arrived at the Walmart meeting point after 11 p.m. After waiting there in vain for 45 minutes, she and Dante finally rendezvous on Manor Ridge Drive, near his grandmother's house where he'd been staying.
And she came down to Pueblo, and we're talking or whatever. We ended up, she ended up, getting mad at me or whatever. So, I went back home that night. I thought she was just going to go back home, but she ended up staying till the next morning.
Dante claims Kelsey never went home. Instead, he says she slept in her car. And at about 7 that morning, she asked him to take her to a local hospital because she wasn't feeling well.
So, went to Parkview, and she went in and stayed for about almost 2 hours, hour 45 too. She came out and she told me she wasn't pregnant.
Now that's an eyebrow raiser right there. Since just the previous morning, a doctor in Denver had confirmed the pregnancy and a healthy baby with that ultrasound. Still, Dante proceeds with his story, claiming at about 9 a.m., the two drove from the hospital and ended up at that Walmart where they parted ways. As it turns out, forever.
She went to go get some snacks, like something to eat. She was hungry. And then came back out, we ended up talking, and she ended up showing me, get out of the car at Walmart. And she didn't want to take me home, so I just left from Walmart and started walking home.
Yeah, you didn't hurt this girl, right?
No, I never hurt her.
Could Kelsey have harmed herself, distraught over a supposed miscarriage? In his interview, Dante described her as a troubled, erratic young woman.
She had bad anxiety. She was anxiety type, so she had pills for that.
What can you tell me about that?
She's told me before that she's ended up in the hospital a few times from overdosing, I guess.
Dante cast her to police as someone who had troubles with drugs.
I don't believe that, no.
So do you think that Dante made all these statements up?
Yes.
And why do you think he did?
To try and throw the attention some other direction. I mean, even if Kelsey did commit suicide, which I don't believe she did, because she was happy. She wanted that baby. She wanted to be a mom. But if she committed suicide, you would find her body.
Dante is allowed to leave. And then, 8 days after the disappearance, a breakthrough.
The car of a missing Denver woman has been found in Pueblo.
Kelsey's car is discovered in a different Pueblo hospital. The car was abandoned in the parking lot. But Andrew McLaughlin, deputy police chief at the time, says police are unable to determine who left it there.
We did not have any good security footage that could tell us who dropped off the car, how the car got there.
But you find the car and no Kelsey.
And no Kelsey. Normally, if someone was going to go away for a few days, they'd take their car with them. So we are now leaning towards foul play. So we accelerate the case.
Attention now returns with some urgency to Dante's version of events. And already, some things aren't adding up. Remember how Dante said he dropped Kelsey off at this hospital at around 7 a.m. on February 5th? He said he waited outside for her.
She went in and stayed for about almost 2 hours.
But there's just one problem with his story.
We have no record of Kelsey Schelling ever being here at Parkview Medical Center.
Now, what do you check to find out if she was here or not?
We have a medical records system that keeps track of every patient that's ever walked through our doors.
So for you, there was no way she's ever here?
That's correct.
We went to Parkview Hospital, and they said, we have no record of Kelsey ever being here. Would that be a suspicious set of circumstances in the way you look at Dante?
Yes, it is.
In fact, much of Dante's story is going to start to crumble quite shortly.
Well, this is another glaring hole in his statement.
Because there were security cameras almost everywhere along the way. And police say they showed no signs of Kelsey, only Dante.
You're on video, dude. It's not the car. It's on the video.
Stay with us.
2020 continues. What if?
You're looking at surveillance video of that Walmart parking lot from Tuesday at noon. This is Kelsey Schelling's black Chevy Cruze entering a parking spot. Remember, Dante told police he and Kelsey then went inside the store to grab something to eat.
She went to go get some snacks, like something to eat, because she was hungry.
But watch closely. Only one person is seen emerging from that Chevy, and it's Dante. He gets out of the driver's side and walks toward the front of the store. ABC consultant and former FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett reviewed the video for us.
This is another glaring hole in his statement, where he contends that the two of them are together, and clearly, based on the surveillance, it's one person.
Dante is later seen walking through a parking lot in the rear of the store, where his mother arrives to pick him up. But what happens next to that parked Chevy? Could Kelsey still be in the car? Well, watch as it sits and sits and sits through the day, through the night. And over an 18-hour period, nobody is seen getting in or out of the car. But then, at 7:17 the following morning, a Walmart camera captures this man in a gray hoodie walking across a parking lot. Now, watch the camera trained on Kelsey's Chevy. The man with the hoodie approaches the car without hesitation. He opens the driver's door, gets in, and moments later, drives the car away.
It's a car that that person is familiar with. And we know earlier that Dante had the key. So who is this? I don't know. It's hard to imagine it's not anyone other than Dante.
Who do you think that someone was that came back and drove that car away?
You know, there's similarities to Dante, but it's nothing that we can 100% say that is the person who drove it away.
And other security cameras capture something Dante omitted from his account to police. Remember, he said after leaving the hospital that morning, he and Kelsey drove to the Walmart. But it turns out he did make a stop at this Pueblo bank. This video was shot at about 11:40 a.m. before he arrived at the Walmart. Dante is seen pulling up to a drive-through ATM in Kelsey's Chevy Cruze, and he's using Kelsey's bank card to withdraw $400 from her account. Kelsey is nowhere to be seen.
Is it suspicious for you that he uses that card?
It is part of the suspicious activity, yes. And that is one more addition that we have in the case.
Cops now believe that Dante knows much more about Kelsey's disappearance than he's letting on. Time for Cops versus Dante, the rematch.
This is the second time I talked to you. You're afforded certain rights by the Constitution.
These detectives had a wealth of information to go at him that I and other people would have died to have had in an interview.
Playing a game of 2-on-1, the Pueblo detectives confront Dante about his visit to the ATM using Kelsey's bank card.
I don't know the nice way to put this, but why'd you get the money?
The money?
Mm-hmm.
What money?
11:39 at the bank. You're on video, dude. In her car with her credit card. You're on video.
This for the 400 they're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
This is for my phone bill.
Why didn't you go with you to the ATM? It's not the car. It's on the video.
It may have been while she was over the hospital. Honestly, I'm not sure about like I said, like my time frame has been messed up.
The detective moves on to another topic, pressing the power forward about why there's no record of Kelsey ever showing up at that hospital.
There's no record of her ever being a part two.
That's like all I have to say. Like,
it's in my shoes, and you know, if you see the questions that
I understand where you're coming from. Like, completely do. Like, I get it, but I don't even know what to say right now.
It's clearly an opening. The light's almost coming on like I'm boxed here, and I feel like I'm in trouble.
But Garrett believes right at that moment, the cops make a blunder. Instead of cornering Dante on these contradictions, they hopscotch over to an unrelated topic.
When you dropped her off at Walmart, where were you parked at?
I mean, like, apparently you guys know, so, like, I don't understand why you, like, I told him one time, like, that's all I can say about it.
You dropped her off. When was that again?
Can I speak to a lawyer, please? So you guys just keep asking the same questions over and over, and we, I was like, speak to a lawyer.
And with that, game over. The detectives walk out of the room, and the interrogation is concluded, with key questions about that Walmart video, for instance, left unasked.
Unfortunately, this is a very poorly executed interview. I think it's a tremendous missed opportunity because you have a case that you don't have physical evidence.
Pueblo police wouldn't discuss details of the interrogation, but they acknowledged that it was their last shot at talking to Dante about the case.
Once he shut down, our avenues of trying to talk to him end.
How did you read that?
We read it as, you know, the possibility that he knows something.
Now, the police still have Dante dead to rights using Kelsey's bank card. So they arrest him and charge him with identity theft. But just a month later, to Kelsey's family's horror, the charge is dropped.
How do you prove she did not or did give him permission at that time? You don't know that. And since you had him permission to do it before, it makes it a very difficult case to prosecute.
He's out there walking around free as a bird. Why would that be the case if he's in that interrogation room lying to your officers?
Lying to someone is not evidence of the crime.
I just have to ask you, how does all of this make you feel?
Sick. Angry. If we just want an effective investigation done into Kelsey's disappearance.
Bad blood develops between Kelsey's family and the Pueblo Police Department. Angry that the police refused to even classify Kelsey's disappearance as a criminal case, her family takes matters into their own hands.
Her family is pleading for your help.
They go public, holding a press conference to bring attention to the case.
And law enforcement has informed us that Dante Lucas accessed her bank account.
The family's plight strikes a chord in Pueblo.
What do we want? Justice!
Hundreds of residents join in the search for Kelsey. Kelsey's family offers a $50,000 reward and creates this Help Find Kelsey Facebook page with detailed information about the case and a call-out for any tips. But despite these efforts, nothing turns up.
The ride home is always really tough, going home empty-handed.
2 years pass. Hope fades. But coming up, a startling message is about to come through that Facebook page, giving Laura hope that maybe she can get her daughter back without the Pueblo police. A mystery emailer is about to deliver shocking news. He claims he knows all about what Dante was up to and that Kelsey is alive, being held along with other kidnapped women. And there's video to prove it.
That there was video of Kelsey screaming for help.
Maybe she is out there. Maybe she is alive.
I mean, it was just what if? What if?
When 2020 continues.
Your name's Tickle, right?
As Laura Saxton tends pigs in her Yuma, Colorado home, she's convinced another kind of swine has taken her daughter. But was Kelsey murdered? Or could she somehow be alive?
What if she is still out there somewhere?
Our story is about to take a dramatic turn to the east. This is Portsmouth, Ohio, a stone's throw from the Kentucky border. This former meatpacking hub, now plagued by prescription drug abuse, would seem to have nothing to do with the disappearance of Kelsey Schelling 1,200 miles away in Colorado. But listen to this mother's story.
I want her to come running down that street. Come walking around the corner.
Marcella Lancaster has never met Kelsey's mom, Laura Saxton, but she knows all about her pain.
You gotta just, try not to cry every day in front of my grandson.
Just 2 months after Kelsey Schelling disappeared, leaving behind no trace but her abandoned car, a strikingly similar fate befell Marcella's 25-year-old daughter, Megan. She vanished from Portsmouth, also leaving behind no trace but her abandoned car.
At first glance, there are a lot of similarities between these two cases, which one could conclude that the same individual or a group are involved in both of them.
the Portsmouth police are drawing a blank. But Marcella and her family have been relentless in their search.
An eerie feeling like there's something, like we're going to find something.
Megan's sister-in-law, Katie, runs point for the family. And so, for more than 3 years, parallel family tragedies playing out in separate time zones. Both families organizing searches, setting up Facebook pages to field leads, and doing whatever they can to keep public attention on their respective cases.
Many in Pueblo are not giving up on finding clues that could help find Kelsey Schelling.
Why do you think people feel so strongly about Kelsey's case?
You know, they can't believe it. You know, they try and imagine what if it was their child.
And in both cases, both families realizing it may all be for naught.
I was finally coming to terms with backing off a little bit.
You've had so many dead ends in this situation. Is it hard to keep hope?
As far as the hope of actually finding her, that dwindles, you know, every day.
But last October, as Dante Lucas is working and playing basketball in Pueblo, and Laura is reconciling herself to her worst-case scenario, a startling development. A mysterious message of hope comes through that Help Find Kelsey Facebook page.
It was from a woman who I'm not familiar with, saying, if I have information about Kelsey, can I remain anonymous?
The woman says her name is Jenna McLean, and that it's risky for her to come forward. Her life is in danger. She passes the conversation on to a male associate who writes, "Ma'am, please, your daughter is not dead. She will be back home alive." The man knows all sorts of details of the case and offers a troubling account of what really befell Kelsey, claiming her baby daddy Dante had hired a friend to kill her. Dante has no idea she is alive. He thinks she is dead. Cliff, who was ordered to kill her, opted to keep her and sell her.
And that the friend did not kill her. He sold her into sex trafficking. He had a fake grave dug and showed that to Dante as proof that he had killed Kelsey. The baby had been aborted. There was video of it being done, of Kelsey screaming.
How did that affect you?
It's really hard to find words to use for it because it's so awful. It made me sick. I mean, I could barely function.
That same month, 1,200 miles away in Ohio, a nearly identical development. One Jenna McLean reaches out to Megan Lancaster's family through Facebook, says she has information, then passes the conversation on to a male associate who knows all about Megan's case.
Out of nowhere, he pops up. He says, I know where Megan is, and I can get her back. He tells me how she was tortured, and that she was in sex trafficking, and he told me that they kept her on chains.
Both families get a nearly identical, highly bizarre proposition. The emailer says he can help each missing woman escape, but he needs money. He tells Katie to bring $50,000 in cash, $25,000 up front, to Vancouver, Washington, specifically to this McDonald's, and deliver it to a man named Marcus who will be wearing a red hat.
The exchange was that if I would come to Washington, that I could have Megan.
Laura gets the same offer.
Once the money was exchanged, then this courier person would go and get Kelsey and bring her back to the McDonald's.
Needless to say, the whole thing sounds fishy. In fact, it could be one of the most diabolical scams ever conceived. And yet, how can a desperate mother say no?
I just thought, what if she's been out there and I could have found her and we haven't?
Despite her skepticism, Laura decides to play ball, writing back she's ready to make a deal.
I'll have to sell some stocks, which will take about a week, but I can push to expedite that process.
Katie also agrees, but there's a twist. Both families are working with 2020. When it's time for the drop, the delivery man will be one of our producers. Enough games. Before we give this guy anything, it's time for some answers.
Right when we're at the trunk, get ready. We're about 10 seconds away.
Stay with us.
2020 continues. What if?
The mystery of Kelsey Schelling's disappearance has brought us all the way here, Vancouver, Washington, and an ordinary McDonald's where somebody is about to conduct some extraordinary business.
A picture was sent, a name was given, very specific instructions.
Laura Saxton has arranged this meeting with a mysterious emailer. He's promised to return Kelsey from the clutches of a sex trafficking ring if she will hand deliver $50,000 here to a man named Marcus wearing a red hat. Concerned about possible criminal involvement, Kelsey's family has asked Vancouver police to meet the courier undercover.
We didn't know if this actually was a sex trafficking issue or if it was extortion. You felt like law enforcement should have been involved in the situation.
But just before the appointed time, the Vancouver police back out, believing it to be a scam and not an actual human trafficking plot. But 2020 has that Golden Arches under surveillance, and our cameras are rolling as a man with a red hat enters. He sits quietly, doesn't even order a McShake, waiting for his takeout order of cold hard cash. But after no one shows up, he takes his leave. We show the video to Laura.
I'm really surprised that somebody actually showed up. It is weird, eerie to see that they actually were, going through with this.
Laura is more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Is this for real or is it a scam?
It was just all a matter of trying to get down to the truth of this.
Now, 2020 has uncovered the key to cracking this mystery. It's that other tormented family in Ohio, the family of Megan Lancaster.
What if he really does have her, and I can bring her home?
They've also been promised to get their missing loved one back if they bring a supersized bag of Benjamins to that same Golden Arches and deliver it to a man named Marcus wearing, you guessed it, a red hat.
It's almost a relief to know that they were doing this to somebody else in a way, because then that's just 100% clarification that some dirtbags out there are trying to get money off of these poor families.
Both families now convinced they're being conned and ready to fight back.
I was like hell-bent on this person being found.
I wanted to know why. Why did you randomly pick us? Why did you randomly pick the other family? Why?
Katie, you said this morning that they sent you a text message.
To answer that question, Katie has agreed to work with 2020 to set up a sting operation.
They will be sending Marcus.
Just 2 weeks after Marcus came to scoop up Laura's cash, Katie arranges a similar meeting of her own. But there's a twist. She will be bringing ABC News producer Jerry Wagshall and a hidden camera. Katie and Jerry walk into that Vancouver McDonald's, the appointed meet time. They spot Marcus, the man with the red hat, and walk over to him. Katie's been instructed not to ask any questions, so they tell Marcus they've brought the money, but the cash is in the trunk of a car parked outside. Okay, let's get ready. They all head out to the parking lot. But before the trunk is open, it's time for a little heart-to-heart with Marcus.
Marcus, Ryan Smith, ABC News. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. Why'd you come here to take $25,000 from Katie?
I don't know.
You don't know why you're here to take $25,000 from Katie?
Nope.
What are you here for?
Oh, because to collect some money.
Marcus claims he was suckered too, lured online into a supposed jewelry venture. He says he was supposed to pick up the money and wire it to someone he's never met.
So a random guy tells you to go to McDonald's twice in less than 2 weeks to meet people to pick up money, and you don't think anything of it?
I didn't think none of it.
We were told that you were going to deliver Megan to Katie today. Is that true?
I have no idea about no Megan or no kidnapping or anything like that.
See how this doesn't make sense?
Yeah.
Do you see how it sounds like you're involved? This would be a scheme to extort money from families who have family members that are missing.
I didn't know nothing of this.
How could you even start this? We're talking
about a
human
missing
trafficking
person.
here.
I had no clue anybody was supposed to be exchanging up for a human being. If I did know, I would not have been involved in this situation.
We showed our confrontation with Marcus to Laura.
I just feel shaky inside. Definitely a big scam.
It's important that you be real honest with me.
Yeah, I'm real honest.
You have never heard of Kelsey Schilling.
Never.
You have never heard of Megan Lancaster.
Never.
I guess Marcus is the fall boy, and I want to know who's behind it.
So who was sending those emails? Well, it turns out they may be a little tougher to get to. An FBI analysis of the emailer's Facebook page revealed that it utilized an IP address which is traced back to, of all places, Russia.
That's the frustrating part about internet scams, is they're difficult to identify and even more difficult to hold the people accountable.
But since we confronted Marcus, both Laura and Katie have stopped receiving those tormenting messages.
I'm really grateful to know that we know the answer, and this needs to just be a warning to other families who have missing family members that these people are out there. They're looking for you, they're studying you, they don't have a problem with hurting you and taking your money.
Coming up, the extortion plot may be laid to rest, but Laura now returns her focus to her prime suspect, Dante Lucas. And so do we. How about a little one-on-one?
Dante Lucas, I'm with ABC News 2020.
Stay with us.
The missing pregnant woman and her unborn baby remembered in Pueblo today.
This lost daughter and unborn grandchild. Just a few weeks ago, she was back in Pueblo, organizing yet another search party.
Can swing back that way? Or?
Combing the landscape for any clues.
It's just like looking for a needle in a haystack. I don't think I can survive if I don't find her.
Just like the family of Megan Lancaster back in Ohio, Laura vows she will never give up until she is finally reunited with the person she loves most in this world.
Bring her home. I want to lay her to rest. She deserves to be honored. We deserve a place to go visit her.
And right here tonight, a major new development. 2020 has just learned that the Pueblo Police Department is planning to turn over Kelsey's case to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
For those families, perhaps a step toward resolution. So if you were one of those family members, however skeptical you might be, would you have shown up with that exchange money if there was any chance at all that it could free your daughter?
We hope you'll let us know on Facebook and on Twitter. Use the hashtag ABC2020. In the meantime, I'm David Muir.
And I'm Elizabeth Vargas. For all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, have a good night.
In walks a man in his 70s in clear agony, something wrong with his arm.
He was in excruciating pain.
He's literally screaming out.
And there's blisters, there's areas that look like they're dying.
It was a race against time trying to find out what had been injected. He didn't know whether he was going to live or die.
The infection is causing a state of sepsis.
He'd had a botched COVID jab.
This looked like a stranger attack. Premises was going to get searched.
It was crazy, full of emergency services. The police didn't really know what they were dealing with. They find a cache of books and documents about poisons and chemicals and murder.
He used the identity of a community nurse.
He's vanished. There's no sign of him. What's the motive?
Who is this man?
Ingleby Barwick, it's a lovely place to live. We live just on the golf course, so we've got nice views. When I first moved here, it was a new build and there was a vicar first living next door. We've got nice neighbours, we have ex-footballers, we've doctors.
This is an area where wealthy, affluent, middle-class professionals live. It's very respectable. It's got a neighbourhood watch.
My husband was working away at the time, and the next day he rang me and asked why our house was on the news. So obviously it was a big thing, everyone was talking about it.
Murderers aren't always people that you think are going to have that look. You see it on TV and films and they're always portrayed as a monster, but it's actually the people that you know and people that you're supposed to trust.
In Ingleby Barwick, neighbours know each other, but little did they know that behind the garage door of one of these houses there is an individual who's plotting to murder. In November 2023, a man called Patrick O'Hara received a letter from the NHS telling him that he'd been selected for a home visit by a community nurse and a COVID booster jab.
Patrick then received a second letter in January of 2024, and that again reiterated the details of the appointment for the injection to be delivered, and had a QR code that took Patrick to a website with a medical questionnaire that he could complete ahead of the appointment.
And he was happy to have that home visit. And on Sunday, Patrick receives a text message from the community nurse telling him that he'll be getting his home visit the next day.
The nurse knocked at the door. Patrick opened the door, saw the nurse, saw it was someone in a mask, had tinted spectacles, a hat, a long coat, and gloves on.
The community nurse introduces himself as Raj Patel, takes some blood samples, and at that point, Patrick's partner, Jenny, comes into the room and asks the community nurse if he wouldn't mind taking her blood pressure, which he does.
Patrick couldn't see the face of Raj Patel, but his ID was a man with a clipped, neat moustache, a beard, glasses, and a full head of hair. The nurse was speaking in a broken English Asian accent.
And then the community nurse tells Patrick that he's eligible for his COVID booster jab, and so offers his arm and gets the injection.
The jab was incredibly painful. Patrick yelled in pain, he yelled bloody hell. The nurse assured him this sort of thing happened.
But Patrick's starting to get a bit worried because his arm is very sore. He's a little bit worried about what's going on, so he leaves the house to see where the nurse has gone. And there's no sign of him. He's vanished.
Patrick was concerned about the pain in his arm, and as a result he attended the local hospital. It was deemed to be likely to be side effects of a vaccination.
And the doctors would have thought it's a bit unusual, but it's not uncommon to react to an injection. It's what we want the body to do so that we can gain immunity to that foreign thing. And so when it's a bit sore, we might be thinking, oh look, could there be an infection that was introduced? Possibly. Why not give him some antibiotics and just see if that helps settle things down? That should have been the end of the case.
The pain is really getting quite intense now. There's some quite nasty blistering on his skin. He's really worried, so eventually he goes to the accident and emergency unit at his local RVI hospital in Newcastle.
When he comes back and the antibiotics haven't worked, the pain is worse, and he's now got areas of skin that are clearly dying or blistered, then this is no longer a simple vaccine reaction. Something else has gone on. If this was an infection, then it hasn't been controlled by antibiotics. It means that it's a severe infection. If there's something else that's gone on to cause this tissue to die, then he needs that dead tissue to be removed.
He's diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis, which is basically like a flesh-eating condition.
And necrotizing fasciitis is a deeper infection. It goes right down to the fascia, which covers the muscle, and it spreads quickly. They have to keep cutting away the tissue to clear the infection. But the incidence of necrotizing fasciitis in an otherwise fit and well person who's just had an injection is vanishingly small. It's not something we see. I haven't seen any necrotizing infections, bad flesh-eating bugs, in anyone who's had a vaccination before. And that's in 20 years of doing medicine.
So all this time, Patrick's lying in intensive care, not knowing what's caused this, not knowing what the outcome's going to be, worried he's going to die. And of course, Jenny, who's been his partner for 20 years, has no idea what's happening, and she's looking at the possibility that he might die.
The doctors and nurses at the RVI were baffled by what happened.
When Patrick's on intensive care, it's likely when they realise we need to feed back to the community nurse. We need to let the vaccine manufacturer know that something was wrong. So they'd have started digging.
They start to have a look at the letters that he'd received about this appointment, and very quickly it becomes apparent that there is no Raj Patel and there is no community nursing team, and these letters that he'd received were actually fake.
And at that point, the police were contacted because it appeared that somebody had administered an injection of an unknown substance into Patrick and caused him to be seriously unwell.
If this community nurse has injected Patrick with a life-threatening poison, could it be that he's going around the community doing it to other people?
Is there a wider risk to the general public with regards to this individual, or is it an isolated incident?
This is a very real prospect that the police have got to consider, because they just don't know who this person is. Who is Raj Patel? Patrick O'Hara, a man in his 70s, is lying in intensive care. He's in agony.
This was a guy who initially went in saying he'd had a botched COVID jab. It was a race against time trying to find out what had been injected.
And so at that point, they call in the police, and it becomes apparent this is an attempt to take somebody's life.
Generally, when you're talking about murders and homicides, the statistics say it's around about 80% of victims have had some kind of contact with the person who've killed them or attempted to kill them. Whether that be in a domestic environment or socially. Stranger murders are very unusual. They very rarely take place. They do happen, obviously, but it's rare. Most people have some kind of relationship with the person that's killed them, whether that be a long-term relationship or a very short interaction. On face value, it was somebody called Raj Patel, who is or is purporting to be a healthcare nurse, attending the address to deliver a vaccine, which actually was all false.
You have got two elderly people in their own home who have been attacked. Now, where do you start from? Because when you deal with a murder in the street, there's normally obvious signs of how it's happened, the method, there's a scene, there's evidence. But on this occasion, a person has gone in, they've got gloves on, they're completely covered up, so there's not going to be any DNA. For all intents and purposes, for any one of us, if we looked at these letters, they would look as if they were genuine letters from the NHS.
They were established as forgeries. As an investigator, you want to show, one, the planning involved in forging them, but also you've got to prove that they are false. And that means going to the hospital, going to the NHS, and evidencing the fact that it is false, the fact that Raj Patel doesn't exist. Is there somebody called Raj Patel in the hospital? So is he using somebody else's name, or is it just a work of fiction? The fact that everything within that letter is false, and the only people that can give you that evidence are the NHS.
Patrick's lying in intensive care, not knowing what's caused this, not knowing what the outcome's going to be, worried he's going to die.
wasn't a COVID booster, but nobody had any idea of what it was. Medical staff wanted to know. It was obvious now that Patrick O'Hara had been poisoned, had been left for dead.
Jenny, his partner, has no idea what's happening.
After he was admitted to hospital, he had this pain in his arm where he'd been injected, and gradually the tissue underneath the skin became badly damaged and became infected, and that created this condition called necrotizing fasciitis. You can lose the arm or you can die. It's really quite a dangerous thing. It happens when you damage the skin and bacteria inside the skin start growing and start damaging the tissues under there. And perhaps what happened when he injected the poison, we presume, under the skin was he created a sort of a locus where that damage could happen. So whenever, as a doctor, we find someone with necrotizing fasciitis, we'd urgently call a surgeon, ask for an assessment. There'd be imaging happening, probably a CT scan or an MRI, trying to understand what's going on, and then the surgeon would try and remove the skin as fast as possible, just kind of to get on top of what's going on.
In any investigation, you start at the point of the crime and work your way backwards a lot of the time. And so it's like you're reversing what's happened in real time.
So the police are desperate to identify who this Raj Patel person is who's visited Patrick at home and given him this injection. Now, fortunately, Patrick lived in the centre of Newcastle, St Thomas Street.
There was a wealth of CCTV in the case. Both Premier Inn and Newcastle City Centre as a whole have good coverage of CCTV cameras.
So they're able to see this very distinctive looking character, a person dressed in the long coat, the hat and the surgical mask, walking on foot through the city centre.
Northumbria Police picked up Raj Patel and followed him all the way through the street and back to the Premier Inn.
And I think when they started viewing the footage within the Premier Inn, alarm bells started ringing.
When Northumbria Police examined the CCTV from the Premier Inn, they were expecting to see Raj Patel, a man of Indian descent. They realised that he had checked in as John Chan, and when they examined the CCTV, they saw a man who looked of Chinese heritage.
You can see this chap who's checked in as John Chan eating breakfast in the restaurant, going back to his room, and then a couple of hours later leaving his room dressed in the outfit that we know that Raj Patel was wearing.
Police tracked John Chan through CCTV and saw him going into the car park at the Premier Inn.
They found him and his white Toyota Yaris. They thought they'd got the man. Then they found out it had fake number plates. They thought, who is this man?
Patrick was being monitored on intensive care with checks every hour, continuous monitoring. They looked at his condition and seen that it was getting worse. They made the decision to go back to theatre to cut out more of the dead tissue and make sure that his chances of survival were only increasing.
Doctors were trying to find out what had been injected into Patrick.
When you look at a poisoner, the typical profile is somebody who wants to have insidious control and they want to dominate their victims. They want to watch them suffer, but in quite a distant and cowardly manner. But I have to say that Raj Patel doesn't quite fit into this narrative because he never intended to stick around. You know, his plan was to give this injection and leave and distance himself as quickly as possible.
Medics are working round the clock to identify what this poison is.
There's some classic poisons like arsenic. Now, arsenic we use in medical therapy now, so people with cancer may receive arsenic because it's toxic and it helps kill the cancer. But it was the classic poison, the poisoner's poison of the 17 and 1800s. You know, the classic poison you would kill someone with was always arsenic. Thallium is interesting. It's a slow-acting poison, really. It destroys your bone marrow, but also damages your nerves and also makes you lose your hair. So classically, people have been exposed to thallium. Some days or weeks after the exposure, you find they lose their hair, they get pain in their fingertips from the nerve damage, and they'll early on have problems with their gut. And so they might have diarrhea, they might have pain in their abdomen as the thallium is damaging the cells in the lining of the gut. So those are two very classic poisons. But it wasn't any of these poisons.
From the outset, a very unusual crime, somebody to be injected with what now appears to be a potentially life-threatening poison. What's the motive and who's the person responsible?
The investigators established that the number plates on the car were false. They were the same make of car, but not the model. And so, again, because he was in the car in the city centre, they were able to trace the car's movements on CCTV and ANPR.
Now, there's ANPR cameras, that's automatic number plate recognition cameras, on many main roads in Britain now. So they're able to track the route of the car, and he heads south out of Newcastle down towards the Teesside area, which is about 40 miles away, and eventually ends up in a very nice, wealthy place near Stockton called Ingleby Barwick. And they're able to trace the car all the way back to a house, and that house belongs to a man called Dr. Thomas Kwan.
Northumbria Police, as part of their investigation, spoke to Patrick and to Jenny. And one of the things that Jenny said was that the nurse, Raj Patel, was the same height as her son. And when they spoke to Patrick and said, have you been having any disagreements or disputes with anybody? Because they're trying to find out why. Why was Patrick targeted? Patrick told them that he had had no disputes, no disagreements, and wasn't in any sort of arguments with anyone. The only thing that he could think of was that about a year ago there had been a disagreement, and that was about money, and that was with Jenny's son, Thomas Kwan.
The information from Thomas Kwan may have been given to police by Patrick, but that would only be a suspicion at the time. And so they would be developing that as a line of investigation, but also you've got to follow where the evidence takes you, and by tracing the car and CCTV to the house of Thomas Kwan. So that suspicion that Patrick had given to the police officers who had attended the hospital was kind of cemented.
The police went to the hotel and obtained the details of the person who had booked in, John Chan. However, the bank card they'd used to pay for the room was not in that name. And when they did the financial inquiries regarding the bank card, it's at that stage they realised that the person was Thomas Kwan, or certainly that he had paid for the hotel room. That bank card had also been used to pay for parking for the car that had been driven to Newcastle on false number plates. And then when the police looked into Thomas Kwan's address, they found that he owned a car of the same make and model that had travelled to Newcastle on the false plates. And that led to Thomas Kwan being identified as a suspect.
Northumbria Police felt to that point that they had enough to arrest Thomas Kwan, so they attended his home address.
Dr. Kwan, do you mind if we come in for a second, please? Yes. Thank you.
It was 6:30 in the morning. Police got to Kwan's house.
The time is now 06:30 hours, okay? I'm arresting you for the offence of the suspicion of the attempted murder. So you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention one question, something which you'll later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given as evidence.
His demeanour was very calm. He didn't say anything. He was calm. He wasn't shocked in any way.
You're now under arrest on suspicion of those offences, okay?
At the point the police contacted me, they'd clearly identified a single suspect in Thomas Kwan. They had a range of evidence which strongly suggested Thomas Kwan as being the person responsible for delivering the injection to Patrick. The issue at that point was nobody had any idea what was in that injection. And from that, it made it quite difficult at that point to really try to understand what Thomas Kwan's intentions were in delivering that injection. And that was the real challenge at that point in the case. It was fairly clear that Thomas Kwan was the person responsible, but exactly what he'd done and why was the difficulty as far as I saw it.
After Thomas Kwan's arrest and his interview, he didn't cooperate and he didn't answer any questions.
It's not unusual for people who remain silent during an interview, but it doesn't mean that we don't ask the questions. And it can be frustrating for the person being interviewed, and it can be frustrating for the legal advisor within the interview as well. But the interviewing officers won't get frustrated because they've got a job to do. They've got to ask every question that's relevant. Because what you don't want is you don't want him sort of coming up with answers within court at a later date to questions that you haven't asked.
It's not unusual when people are suspected of serious crimes that they remain silent during police interviews. Obviously, you don't want to incriminate yourself by saying something that will give the police the evidence they need to charge you.
The fact that Patrick was so ill, you would use that as part of your strategy during an interview. You would pose questions with regards to, if you tell us what you injected him with, you might be able to help. You've got to remember, this is right at the beginning of the investigation, and so a lot of the evidence that would have been recovered would probably be after those interviews as well, once everything's been put together. So him and his legal advisor would not know the full extent of the evidence against them at that point.
The fact that Thomas Kwan refused to participate in the investigation, it does raise red flags, because if he was innocent and if he was horrified that somebody had tried to kill his mum's partner of 20 years, surely any normal person would have said, I wasn't there, it wasn't me, and they would have denied it. The fact that he said nothing at all, would be quite concerning as an investigator.
By remaining silent, you're clearly not coming across to the police as somebody who's got nothing to hide.
Thomas Kwan is an ordinary man. He was born in Hong Kong and he came to the country when he was 13 and he went to boarding school.
And then studied medicine at Newcastle University. And his parents, I think, had divorced about 27 years before this incident.
My name is Angela, and Dr. Kwan is one of my neighbours. So if I look out my window, I can see into the garden. So we're all quite close. I don't think he was very friendly with any of the neighbours. They more or less kept themselves to themselves. Just see them coming in and out, sort of thing. Never really saw him out playing with a child or anything. It was all a bit strange. My friend has had a couple of runs in with him. So her children, when they were younger, playing football, the ball went over the garden and he tried to say the ball wasn't there, but she caught him stabbing it and throwing it in the bin.
And when the neighbour mentioned that, the press might like to hear about the local GP acting in such a way, he turned up at her house with some brand new footballs and football kits. So is it relevant to the investigation? Probably not. It's interesting. It's interesting that he cares about what people think about him.
When you look at Thomas Kwan, he's 53, he's got a lovely house and home and family. He would be one of the people that you would least suspect of being a criminal, because there isn't really an obvious motivation.
I first had Dr. Kwan as my GP around 7 years ago when I first moved to Sunderland. It was my first choice of practice because it was the closest to where I live. He seemed alright at first. His room was definitely more lavish than other standard GP rooms. I mean, the room that we're in right now is your normal standard table, bed, what have you. But his was very lavish. He'd had really big curtains and had massive pelmet at the top of his window and the draped curtains. A huge oak table instead of your normal table that doctors would have. He had ornaments and things like that, which kind of also made me think he likes finer things in life.
So he was obviously concerned about his image. He was concerned about his image as a doctor, but then he was a GP, and he was a well-established GP in the area, so it would be obvious that he's concerned about what people think of him.
At first, my initial appointment was, he was friendly, he was chatty, welcomed us to the surgery, you know, nothing out of the ordinary. Had a nice chat with him about any health issues I had, but that changed from my second visit of him not speaking at all. I say at all, probably you'd get a hello or a how are you when you got into the room, but after that he would just sit and type on his computer. He wouldn't look at you or speak or anything, and it was very daunting. And that was obviously a big change from the first appointment. That was a huge change, and it was just a bit, that's a bit strange, a bit odd, a bit peculiar to experience.
He's a professional. He has to engage with people because he has to find out what's wrong with them. He has to diagnose them with stuff. But then he has to do his work as well. So that just could be the way he works as a doctor.
Very much Jekyll and Hyde type of scenario. And it carried on like that from every appointment I had with him. He opened the door for me, and walking past him was, I don't want to say intimidating, but there was something that you could just feel that wasn't right. You know when you walk past somebody and you just go, oh no, they're not nice. You just don't feel comfortable walking past him. It was like that. I just didn't feel right. And I just thought, God, trust me gut. I need to see somebody else. I ended up not feeling safe because I didn't feel like he was listening to us properly, and I just didn't feel right with him.
So as a forensic psychiatrist, I deal with a lot of criminal cases, and what really stands out to me and what really makes this case unique is the offender profile. So you've got somebody who's well respected, a doctor, a GP, that's the first thing. Secondly, the method that he chose of poisoning is exceptionally rare. But also the audacity and the risk taking that he did, the boldness of what he did, going in disguise to seeing his own mother and his mother's partner.
Thomas Kwan had had breakfast at the Premier Inn. He'd sat there for 20 minutes, he'd enjoyed his breakfast. He didn't appear to be stressed, worried about anything that he was about to do. And then he put on his disguise and became Raj Patel. That to me demonstrates a real lack of empathy, about caring, and about the awful task, the awful thing that he was about to do. He just seemed to be so relaxed about it.
Externally, he looked calm, but you never really know what somebody's feeling internally. But it does feel like he's emotionally detached. It feels like he's committed to his actions. This doesn't strike me as somebody who's ambivalent, who's panicking, who's trying to decide whether he wants to go through this or not. It feels like he's already made his decision.
After Thomas Kwan injected Patrick with what he believed was going to be a lethal poison, he then gently saunters off and walks into a Greggs where he gets something to eat. Now that's somebody who's really relaxed and really at peace with himself.
They'd be emotionally aroused, there's probably a lot of adrenaline going through their body, and they wouldn't be hungry. So the very fact that Kwan could do this after, from what he thinks, he's just killed his mother's partner, to me shows a level of emotional detachment and calmness. It seems like he's comfortable with what he's just done. I think it's fair to say that most people in this situation would be, frightened. Of course, this lack of fear is one of the key features of psychopathy. But having said that, I don't think I could definitively say that Kwan was a psychopath because we don't know enough about the other core features like manipulation, being very, very charming. And also psychopaths are like this in all their actions throughout all of their lives, not just on one particular event.
One big question in this case, which everybody has asked, is how come Patrick O'Hara or Jenny Lung didn't recognise that it was Thomas Kwan? Jenny didn't recognise that it was her son, Patrick O'Hara, didn't recognise that it was his partner's son. This was somebody they knew. So, how good was Thomas Kwan's disguise? Clearly very good.
Why wouldn't his mother and Patrick recognise him? But if you think of the context of the crime and how it was planned and how it was put together, you know, the letters that were sent, they looked original, they looked genuine. If you think of the text that was sent the night before, and if you think of the context at that time, that people were getting COVID boosters. So why would they think it? Why would they be suspicious?
The audacity of Kwan's actions. You know, he put on this disguise, he put on some makeup to darken his skin, to change his identity, but he went to his own mother's house and he interacted with his mother's partner. They'd been together for 20 years, so obviously they were very familiar. So just the boldness that it takes to try and pull something like this, and the naivety of it all.
From my own experiences, it's really unusual for people to go to such lengths to disguise who they are and to, you know, change their name, their identity, not just once, but twice, to use the identity of Raj Patel and then to use the identity of John Chan. And coupled with the letters, the false letters that Thomas Kwan wrote, it's really unusual to go to that length. And it wasn't just as if he'd planned all this the day before.
Patrick, of course, is still in hospital with a serious health condition, and medics are battling to save his arm, save his life. The problem they've got is they don't know what they're dealing with. They don't know what this poison is. And of course, the one person who does know what the poison is the person who administered it, and that is the suspect, Thomas Kwan.
Dr. Kwan. Dr. Kwan, hello.
So you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention one question, something which you'll later rely on in court.
He was just the average doctor, you know, and I trusted him. I put, you know, my life in his hands. I don't understand how he's done something like this.
I received contact later that same day to explain that when they'd searched Thomas Kwan's house, they had to stop the search.
After Thomas Kwan's arrest and his interview, although he didn't cooperate and he didn't answer any questions, one of the things that he did say to police officers was to be careful about going into the garage.
Specialist search teams were called into the address so that they could safely examine what was in the house.
I don't think police could quite believe what they found when they went into the garage.
Around like early evening, and I got a call to say, Terry, you need to get to Ingleby Barwick. There's something happened in the street. So we arrived at the street. It was crazy, full of emergency services. I work on my own. I'm a one-man band, and I get out and I start taking photographs and filming whatever's happening.
So in this quiet place of Ingleby Barwick, residents suddenly see police officers turning up in blue sort of chemical protective suits and going into the house of a person they think is a respectable, upstanding citizen.
Everyone was looking out the window. We were all taking pictures. It was exciting, but we were actually getting more and more scared the more the night was going on and more tents were popping up and things like that.
So we started knocking on doors, knocking on neighbours' doors. Some would speak, some wouldn't, but none of them knew what was going on.
Gossip would have been flying around, and very likely the police weren't telling them much at that stage, because in reality the police didn't really know what they were dealing with either.
My initial suspicions were that it was some type of fire, or there'd been a fire and I'd missed it, because the amount of fire engines and firemen on scene, the neighbours were concerned. They were asking us, try and find out, what's happened.
People look out for each other here. There is a neighbourhood watch, and obviously all the gardens you can see what everybody's doing. My neighbour rang me and said, you need to come over here and see what's going on. They were putting big lights up, tents were popping up. We knew it was a doctor, we knew it was something bad had gone on. We actually thought, He'd been killing people, and there was bodies in the garden as the tents were coming up. They were coming out of the house with boxes, and there was just bright lights flashing everywhere.
When police conducted the home search, they would cordon off an area and they would tell people to either stay in their homes or get out of their homes, depending on the severity. But that would lead to speculation. That would lead to people looking out their windows, that would lead to people posting things on social media. So there is a fine line between an investigation and sharing information.
We were looking out on one of the son's bedrooms. Then when Terry the Snapper we let in, he was getting some photographs from another bedroom view that other people couldn't get hold of.
When we're talking about a search of a premises, you have to have a strategy. Is there anything forensically within that premises that we need to recover? What are we looking for? If we find items, how are we going to preserve that evidence? And there'll be a digital forensic strategy as well with regards to any digital devices like laptops or iPads.
We'd seen that they were getting changed into PPE. Not just normal PPE. I've arrived at jobs before and I've seen PPE and, suits that they have to wear for different incidents. This was like, they looked as if they were going to get ready to go into space. It was as if there was like some explosive in the house and they didn't know or they weren't aware of what it was, as to how careful they were going, I mean, they're carrying trays in the house and bringing trays out, things on the trays and placing them very carefully. And it was, it's like nothing I've ever seen.
The officers who attended found the false number plates that had been used on the car to travel to Newcastle. It was quite clear by that stage that we could establish that Thomas Kwan was the individual who delivered the injection into Patrick's arm. The question was what it was that had been used in the injection, but also whether there was any motive for doing so.
Kwan's house looked ordinary. It looked spotless, it was clean, it was just a normal house. But as they moved through the house, they found something far more sinister.
Upon finding what appeared to be harmful chemicals and documents relating to poisons, those officers then had to stop, leave the address.
Police have obviously had this comment from Kwan about being careful about the garage, and it's clear quite early on that he's got a big stockpile of chemicals.
And specialist search teams then had to be called in order to conduct that search safely, given the nature of the poisons that were being recovered.
Patrick laid in intensive care for 5 days. The doctors that were treating him were racing against time to try and identify the substance that had been injected into him.
If the police are thinking about a poison being present in a house, they'd be careful when they walk into the house. They're going to take precautions, and those precautions are quite standard. You don't want to blunder in and knock things over and not understand what's going on in the house. From a poisoning perspective, there's another element as well. You don't simply want to touch things which are poisons, you don't want to knock bottles over, you don't want to release gases. There's lots of things you don't really want to do around a poison, and therefore going in slowly and carefully, fully protected, is a very sensible approach. When they went into the house, they found a number of different poisons. And those poisons included arsenic and thallium and sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is a very strong acid which will cause damage and direct effect. If you inject it into yourself, or you spill it on yourself, or you swallow it, you really get terrible damage in the skin or the lining of your gut as well. Liquid mercury in itself is not particularly toxic. It's quite hard to get into your body. The disaster time of mercury is when you get a big dose into your body through inhaling it. Cyanide is present in lots of chemical reactions. You find it in school chemistry departments, you find it in industry. It's a mitochondrial poison, so this is a mitochondria, the energy parts of your cells. Our cells work because this part of the cell is producing lots of energy. If the mitochondria stop working, it's very toxic, you get ill quite quickly. And they found the components to make ricin.
We worked with the police to find an expert who could comment upon both Patrick's injuries but also the substances that had been recovered from Thomas Kwan's address and whether any of those substances were likely to have caused Patrick's injuries. the Chief Medical Officer at the Defence Science Technology Laboratory, was able to tell us that ricin was unlikely to have been the substance that was injected into Patrick.
Police searched and scoured through this garage full of chemicals, and they found iodimethane.
Of all the substances that had been found in Thomas Kwan's address, iodomethane was the most likely candidate as the substance that had been used against Patrick.
This was a real breakthrough. It was a eureka moment.
Tellingly, the police had also recovered an empty syringe in a grip seal plastic food bag that was labelled with the chemical formula for iodomethane. So putting together the report and the recovery of that syringe with that chemical symbol on it meant that we could safely infer that the chemical that had been used against Patrick was iodomethane.
They find a cache of books and documents about poisons and chemicals and murder. They find that he's got a book from the National Police Centre for Excellence on murder investigations. They look at his computer. They find a huge number of searches being carried out about how to kill people with poisons. They find the terrorist handbook. They find a book which is called the Mujahideen's Poison Handbook, which is how to kill people with certain chemicals.
I was impressed about the number of poisons he had and the variety and the kind of potency of the poisons. These chemicals are not things you can buy very easily.
In January 2023, he set up a shell company. He used the address of his surgery where he worked legitimately, and through that shell company, he was able to buy poisons. He purported to be a researcher and that he needed those poisons for his research.
In the garage, the photographs indicate there was a lot of stuff in there, which must have made it quite difficult to go around preparing poisons. It may have been the reason why he decided not to go down the ricin route, because you would want to have a very clean, careful environment to do work with ricin, and perhaps with cyanide as well. Perhaps going for something like iodomethane or sulfuric acid, because it's neat and in a bottle, can just be drawn out with a syringe. Iodomethane. It's a really uncommon poison. There's not a large amount of information about it. We don't have much experience of it. And I can assure you, if you come to hospital, nobody's thinking about this as a potential poison you might have been exposed to. So turning up to hospital having had this injected into you is so left field. Even a toxicologist, someone like myself who thinks day in, day out of all the poisons out there, I'm not going to be thinking of this poison.
And it was apparent that he'd been doing some research online. There was some material found on computers and telephones that showed Thomas Kwan had been conducting extensive research into how to produce ricin, how much of it would be used to kill somebody.
We know he'd been trying to manufacture ricin, but of course the problem with ricin is to administer it, you put yourself at risk as well, and clearly he didn't want to do that. So perhaps iodomethane was the perfect chemical in his mind, because he could administer it without risk to himself, and it would make it extremely difficult for the medics treating Patrick to know what they were dealing with.
If you look at the compound, it's a very simple compound. It's simply a methane, which is a single carbon, 3 hydrogen ions and an iodide. It's about as small a molecule as you can imagine. So if I was going to take a blood sample from a patient and look for a poison, generally we're looking for multiple things. We're not looking for this at all. So unless there's a particular reason to go looking for it, again, you wouldn't detect it. So he's come across a poison which is quite hard to detect. If it's just in a routine thing you do in a post-mortem, or a sample you sent to a lab saying this person's had a poison, can you find anything? They're probably going to say no, there's nothing in there. There have been a few cases in literature. The majority of the cases are industrial accidents, when people have either inhaled it because it's been released in the factory, or their PPE, their overalls, have leaked, and actually there's been exposure through the skin. They've absorbed it through the skin and they've become quite unwell.
The likelihood is that he chose iodomethane because it was such an unusual chemical to use. It's something that medics have got no experience of treating, really. So by using that chemical, he made the likelihood that he would succeed in his plan to kill Patrick even more likely.
The chain of events started by Thomas Kwan would have led to death. Patrick may not have survived this if the surgeons hadn't made the right decisions, which they did. They took him to theatre. They would have been cutting away tissue until the point that it would be bleeding, because bleeding tissue is healthy tissue. The problem is there's a balance between cutting away enough to clear all of the infection, which they did and they had to do, versus cutting away a little bit too much, which will leave an even greater level of disability later.
How dangerous is this poison? Not many humans have been exposed to it, so we don't really have very good information. But Patrick did badly because he got necrotizing fasciitis, which is just a complication of how it was given to him rather than the actual poison itself.
Even with all of the expertise being applied, Patrick still could have died. Thankfully, Patrick survived.
Policewoman came into the streets, knocking on everyone's doors, telling us not to leave the house, to keep the doors shut and all the windows shut. Because obviously he had, supposed to have had a very dangerous ricin poison in the garage. So we were all quite upset actually, because we felt that he'd put us in danger.
One of the aspects of this case is the danger that he caused to himself, but also to others. He was concocting all sorts of poisons and lotions in his own home, in the garage. He's a father, he's got a wife. Any one of them could have gone into that garage unsuspectingly and touched a poison or hurt themselves or others through that.
My husband was working away at the time, and the next day he rang me and asked why our house was on the news.
The news of his arrest was everywhere. It was huge. I think a lot of people were just shocked because they seen him a lot. They had a lot of patients at that surgery. Then when it come out about attempted murder, that's when it really kicked off in the town.
When I'd found out that this guy tried to kill his mother's partner and, you know, inject him with something to kill him, you don't think about a doctor doing something like that, you know. They're supposed to be like trusted professionals, so it was quite shocking.
This was a GP who disguised himself to give a fake COVID jab to somebody he knew, somebody who was his mother's partner, knowing that it wasn't a COVID jab, it was poison.
GPs are incredibly trusted people. You trust your life with them. It would have been really difficult for his patients to realise that they were being treated by a man who was willing to murder.
As investigators, we follow the evidence. Is this a targeted attack on an individual? And if it is a targeted attack on an individual, why? What is the motive? Patrick O'Hara was a 71-year-old guy who's leading a normal life. Why would he be targeted in such a way? Because the perpetrator of the crime left so many bits of evidence for the investigators to follow. I would imagine fairly quickly they put the story together.
The police were able to gather evidence that showed there'd been a long-running dispute between Thomas Kwan and his mother, Jenny.
It dates back almost 30 years to when his parents got divorced, and he had accused his mother of withdrawing £1 million from his father's bank account and then divorcing him. And there was clearly a belief that he had not got what he was entitled to. And I think that was at the heart of the issue that he had with his mother over money.
The relationship between Kwan and his mother, to me, it seems very conditional, very transactional.
That he felt slighted by his mother, and money was one thing that he could argue about. He himself was wealthy. He was trying to buy a house for £2 million.
Because let's not forget, this is a man in his 50s. He's an established doctor, but he seems to still view his mother as a potential source of income.
In Chinese culture, the eldest son inherits the estate. Kwan was clearly furious when his younger brother inherited his father's estate.
Thomas's mother had put in her will the fact that Patrick could live in the house after she died, and therefore he had some kind of ownership of that house.
he saw Patrick as the villain. He was entitled to inherit his mother's estate. This perceived injustice festered for years and led to Kwan writing to his mother, insisting that she make him executor of her estate.
His mother's property in Newcastle was worth a little bit more than £200,000. It wasn't life-changing sums, and I think it was more about his belief that he had a right to the inheritance rather than the amount itself. He felt slighted in the fact that Patrick had got access to the will, and that also that the siblings would probably get an equal share. So I think Kwan thought that he was entitled to something as the eldest son from the estate, and there's a sense that he wasn't getting what he deserved. In one letter he wrote to his mother, he said, "I should get the majority of your will. I'm the one that you love most."
In November 2022, things reached a boiling point and Kwan went to his mother's house in Newcastle, forced his way in, began shouting and becoming aggressive and demanding answers. It got so heated that Patrick and Jenny did call the police, who arrived and asked whether they wanted to press charges. Jenny decided that she didn't because she was worried about her son's career.
I think this shows that in certain circumstances, if his buttons are pushed, Kwan is somebody who can be quite explosive, quite volatile. And according to him, there's a bit of bitterness and resentment because she hadn't showed him enough love growing up. It's hard to know where the truth actually lies.
It clearly established a motive for Thomas Kwan, and this was useful for us as a prosecution team because it set out why he would seek to kill Patrick.
I do think that the main motivation behind Kwan's actions are simply greed. You know, he wanted more money even though he was quite wealthy, and this sense of entitlement, he deserved this money. But I also think to a degree there was an element of him wanting to seek some sort of retribution or revenge to his mother because there had been some recent bad blood between them. They had fallen out, and it feels like he's doing something personal to her by attacking her partner.
The amount of planning that Thomas Kwan did dated back a long, long time. In 2020, he gave his mum a laptop. It was installed with spyware so that he could actually watch them. It was like a covert camera in their home. And he could also monitor their emails and their financial transactions. And then you go to November 2023, which is when he first sent the very first NHS letter asking or suggesting a COVID injection. Then in December 2023, he cleared his diary for January.
And in January 2024, Kwan started researching poisons like ricin, so it really feels like his plan was crystallising.
We know that before he went to Patrick's home to carry out the attempted murder, he carried out a reconnaissance mission. So he and his wife and his young son checked into the Premier Hotel in Newcastle. He no doubt gave his family some excuse as to why they were going to spend the night in Newcastle, that he could check out his route. And then the day before he injected Patrick, he sent a text reminder posing as Raj Patel, the community nurse. And to do that, he ordered an anonymous SIM, because obviously had he sent a text message from his own phone, Patrick would have immediately realised what was going on.
During the police investigation, Northumbria Police did actually uncover 2 other methods that Thomas Kwan must have considered in administrating this poison to Patrick. They found letters. One letter was supposed to be from a gentleman's wine club, and another letter was to provide free meals and free drinks to Patrick. Obviously, Thomas Kwan was actually considering whether or not to lace the wine or lace the food that he was going to provide to Patrick. If he sent wine or he sent food that was laced, Patrick may not have eaten it. Jenny could have eaten it, or they could have given it away. You know, there's no guarantee that Patrick's going to eat it. And if he is going to eat it, when is he going to eat it? Because Thomas Kwan wanted the money straight away. He never sent those letters, so he obviously decided that under the guise of the COVID injection, he could probably do a better, more lethal job.
As a forensic psychiatrist, part of my role as an expert witness is to give evidence to decide if a defendant is in control of their actions, if they have criminal culpability, for example, if it's related to mental illness. And looking at this case, I can say unequivocally, Thomas Kwan was definitely in control of his actions. And I think his pre-planning and putting in all this time and effort proves that beyond doubt.
You have kind of a juxtaposition between him committing a crime but not being a criminal. And so, whilst the planning was detailed and extensive, it was also a little bit amateurish in terms of criminality, a little bit naive in relation to sort of leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for the police to follow in the end, which he did.
When Thomas Kwan was spoken to, there was a real lack of remorse shown throughout. After he gave Patrick the injection, he quite casually went to Greg's. He casually drove home. He's never apologised, never shown any sign of weakness or regret at what he's done.
You know, even after arrest and being remanded in prison and facing a trial for attempted murder, he wrote to his wife and mentioned the fact that Patrick may seek compensation for his injuries. And the tone of that letter and the content of that letter was quite arrogant with regards to, you know, one old man's compensation for ruining 3 people's lives along those lines.
From that letter, he seems to be portraying himself as the victim, himself and his family as being the victims of this old man, who is Patrick, rather than the other way around. Patrick nearly died.
The lack of remorse, the lack of acknowledgement about the level and the gravity of what he'd done, it is unusual with regards to, you know, we have to bear in mind that he was a doctor and he wasn't a seasoned criminal. Having that level of arrogance and entitlement, I would say, in his circumstances, very unusual.
He denied the charges of attempted murder and kept on denying them until the court case and the trial opened. Kwan went to trial at Newcastle Crown Court in October 2024, where Kwan denied the charges of attempted murder.
The barristers were present at court, witnesses had been arranged to attend, and the trial began. Thomas Kwan was in the dock, and the prosecution barrister delivered his opening speech to the jury, describing to them the evidence they were likely to hear and what the prosecution's case was about what had happened to Patrick.
From the outset, Kwan had denied the charges. When he was first arrested, his legal team said he would vehemently contest the charges and deny attempted murder. There was a lot of evidence against Kwan. There was the CCTV showing him leaving the scene of the crime. There was all the material found at his home. There was the copies of the letters that he'd sent to Patrick. There was the books about poison. There were the chemicals. So the weight of evidence against him was extremely strong. I think sometimes when defendants get into court and the reality of a trial hits them, they can sometimes have a change of heart.
We didn't get very far into the trial when Thomas Kwan indicated that he wished to change his plea, and on the 7th of October he asked to have the indictment put to him again, and he entered a guilty plea to the charge of attempted murder. At that point, the prosecution's role changes, and our job is then to present the case to the judge so that they can make a determination as to what the appropriate sentence was.
The prosecution was clear that what had driven this crime was greed, and greed for the sake of greed. Extraordinarily audacious crime.
We needed to make clear to the judge the level of planning in this case, the number of steps that Thomas Kwan had taken to disguise what had happened. It was also important to highlight to the judge that this was an attempt to murder Patrick for financial gain. Thomas Kwan's ultimate aim was to remove Patrick as an obstacle to his perceived right to his inheritance from his mother. And the law recognises that murdering someone for financial gain is a particularly serious offence. Another important factor was the location of the offence. The offence was committed in Patrick's own home, and we should all have the right to feel safe at our own home.
Patrick was in court, surrounded by family members.
The impact on him was extraordinary. So not only the physical scars, which were really quite bad. I mean, he had part of his arm removed. He lived with the scars and the pain for the rest of his life, but also the emotional scars.
Hearing Patrick's victim impact statement in court was incredibly moving for everybody in court, I think. He talked about how his life would never be the same again. He talked about the psychological damage which had been caused to him, and everybody just listened.
He described himself as being like a shell of his former self. All his confidence has gone. His relationship with Jenny sadly broke up. It's hard to overstate the impact that this attempted murder had on him, and will have for the rest of his life.
During the sentencing, Kwan was very calm. In fact, he was calm throughout the whole court proceedings. The judge jailed him for 31 years and 5 months and told him, you won't be out of jail until you're in your 70s.
The judge reflected in her comments that Thomas Kwan, it wasn't just about the money for him. It was about the money to which he felt entitled, and that he was prepared to kill to get that money.
We were waiting on the afternoon for his sentencing. I wouldn't think I'd have a neighbour that was capable of planning murder on somebody, especially a doctor.
He did all of this stuff, you know, to harm his mother's partner, and it just doesn't make sense.
We're quite shocked he got 31 years, but then when you think he was a doctor and the long planning that he's done for murder, that's why he got so long.
The outcome of this case was the culmination of months of hard work between the Crown Prosecution Service and Northumbria Police, and I'm pleased that we were able to deliver justice for Patrick.
Obviously, this year has been horrendous, and I would hope it would never happen to anybody else. But at the moment, I'm still recovering, especially from the post-trauma. That was really bad, and I'm just seeing psychologists and everything else to try to get through all this trauma.
In 31 years, he might be really old, but still get out and have a little bit of a life left, if he's lucky.
Thomas Kwan was a medical doctor. People trusted him, and he has abused that trust and undermined the trust that we all have in our doctors, nurses, medical staff. And the fact that he used the identity of Raj Patel, a community nurse, chipped away at that trust and confidence. And I do feel that that has had a part to play in his sentencing, because he used his medical prowess, his knowledge, he used all of the information that he had to hand to commit his crimes. So his background and his knowledge were part and parcel of the way that he was able to plan and the way that he was able to actually commit this crime.
I've covered many big stories nationally and locally. You know, Dr. Kwan is going to be one of them that I'll never forget. You know, the lengths that he went to try and get away with what he did is unimaginable.
So following the sentencing, his wife spoke to the media, and she gave what was quite an extraordinary statement, really.
I cannot find a man to compare to Tom. In his heart, he is very, very good. I don't blame him. I love him, trust him, and will be here for him until the end. I am going to be buried alongside him. Our son goes with me to prison to see Tom. I tell him everything, and I hope he will understand his dad.
She said he felt very lonely and helpless. All his life, He was looking for his mother's love and never found it. He always believed that she loved others more than her own child.
I'm not sure she necessarily believes that he's innocent of what he ultimately admitted to. But I think she thinks, like he does, that this was his mother's fault. She vows to stand by him. Only time will tell if she does.
A question that I ask myself is, had Kwan not been caught, could he have gone on to kill somebody else? I don't think he's capable of extreme violence, so I don't think he's physically dangerous, but absolutely I think he lacks the moral boundaries and the empathy which would allow him to do something clandestine and secret like poisoning.
How could someone who had gone through medical school, who'd spent all that time working as a GP, flip and go from being one of the guys helping people to someone trying to harm someone?
There's no case in my career in the CPS that's comparable to this. The lengths Thomas Kwan went to commit this offence and to try and hide his offending were unparalleled. Donning a disguise such that he fooled his own mother as to who it was who was in her address is something I've not seen before, and I very much doubt I'll see it again.
From chilling 999 call to murder conviction, stream more true crime with A Killer Makes a Call now on My5. And tonight on Channel 5, examining the killer performance of Ted Bundy. Acts of murder goes inside his twisted mind. Brand new next.